Hello and welcome to Early Years TV with me, 𝗕𝗵𝗵𝗃𝗲. Today is all about selective mutism, and I'm just delighted to be joined today by 𝗬𝗎 Nathanson. 𝗬𝗎 is a child therapist, international speaker, best-selling author, and founder of ConfidentChildren.co.uk. Confident Children has a team of therapists specialising in helping children with selective mutism, and 𝗬𝗎 has published 5 books on selective mutism, an online school training program for schools, a parents' essentials course, and a YouTube channel that has exceeded 350,000 views, as well as an active Facebook page consisting of over 12,000 followers. And she has also featured on BBC Talking about selective mutism. 𝗬𝗎 is passionate about raising awareness of selective mutism worldwide. A very, very warm welcome to Early Years TV, 𝗬𝗎 Nathanson.
Thank you, Kathy. What an introduction. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's brilliant to have you back on because, I mean, as that introduction says there, you're an absolute expert in this area, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you about this really, really fascinating area, and I think often misunderstood. All right, so let's start there then, shall we? What is it that we mean by selective mutism?
Selective mutism is an anxiety disorder. So children and adults who have selective mutism can talk freely when they're comfortable. So usually, typically at home with close family members, they're able to talk absolutely freely. However, in other situations, for example, in public or at school, their fight or flight freeze response gets activated and they're unable to talk in those situations. So it's anxiety that's preventing them from talking in various different situations.
Yeah. So, I mean, that sounds almost like a biological response, isn't it? That's not, I think selective sometimes suggests that they select when they're going to talk, but it's not, is it?
No, and thank you for actually mentioning that, because there is this kind of ongoing kind of like not debate, but in the selective mutism world, people believe that it should, like, selective mutism isn't a very good description of the condition. The preferred term would be something like situational mutism, because it is that they're unable to talk in certain situations. And yes, selective does imply that they are selecting not to talk, but that's not the case. What it really means is they're unable to talk in select situations. And it's definitely not that they're choosing not to talk in those situations at all. That's not the case.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. So, right, so that's the first thing that we need to know. But what else do we need to know as teachers and educators in order to support those children?
Oh, where do I even start? How much time do we have today? Honestly, so much that, you know, educators, teachers, need to know. First of all, like I said, it's anxiety based, and that is crucial because, you know, the common misconception is that these children are choosing not to talk, or they're stubborn, or something I hear a lot is, oh, they have so much self-control by not talking. You know, I wouldn't be able to go the whole day without talking the whole day. Wow, they've got all the self-control, but it's definitely not that. It's rather that they are trapped in the silence. They're actually paralyzed. If we see it as though, you know, being paralyzed in that silence, they've got this anxiety condition. They're unable to talk on the first day at school, the first week of school, and then soon they get known as the person who doesn't talk. So now they've got this identity. Not only they say, I don't talk at school, but everyone else labels them in that way. Children say, oh, she doesn't talk, he doesn't talk. And we've got an anxious child, and now they're being told that they don't talk. And even adults commonly say, oh, she doesn't talk, because that's what's happening. But it becomes almost this identity, and it's so hard for them to break out of it. So they're really like paralyzed in this silence, and they really want to, if we could just wave a magic wand and everything would, you know, the SM would go away and they'd be able to talk and it would be normal and everyone would treat them normally, then of course they would go for that option. However, it's just too scary for them. So the first thing that is really important for educators to know is that it's anxiety based, and the reason why that's important is because it affects how we approach the child. If we think that they're doing it willfully, then we may have a different kind of energy towards the child than if we understand that they are trapped in this situation. So that's really important to understand. Another really important thing is that it's more than just not talking. So again, the term is not very accurate in a way, because it's selective mutism and it's very much focusing on the mutism. However, anxiety is broad and it affects children in many, many ways. And, you know, in this one conversation, I wouldn't be able to kind of encompass all the different ways that SM affects children. But for example, quite often even physical movements can be hard for children with SM. Quite a lot of the children I work with are kind of, because it's, you know, the fight, flight, freeze response, their body is actually very tense, and often they even find kind of joining in PE a real struggle. I'm just thinking of a child who was physically getting hit during what's that game? Where they kind of throw the ball,
dodgeball.
They're doing dodgeball in PE, and the child could not move because he was so physically frozen that they had to kind of sit him out of that activity. So it's not just talking. Also, children sometimes find it hard to eat at school or use the toilet at school. They're, you know, anxious about a variety of things, you know, and that might be because they are unable to approach the teacher to ask to go to the toilet, or it might be because they feel really uncomfortable kind of standing up and going to the toilet because they feel as though people might watch them, or, you know, it's drawing attention to them. So they can really struggle with so much more than just not just the talking. So that's also something that's important for educators to know. And if I can squeeze in another thing, would be that it would be if educators, teachers can work together alongside the parent. That is so crucial, because children with SM present completely differently in the home environment. So working with the parent and understanding, how is your child at home? You know, what is their personality like? What are their interests? Because in school they're a completely different child. They're frozen. They've got all of this within them, but it's not able to be expressed. So if we can, you know, talk to the parents and gain an understanding of the child in their home environment, then that can really help to build that bridge. And, you know, parents of children with SM often get labelled as being overprotective, because they know that the child that we're seeing at school is not how their child really is. So, and obviously as educators, we only see that version of the child, but the parent knows that there's so much more to the child. And so if we can work with the parents, alongside the parents, to help that child just to, you know, eventually show their home self at school, that's really the goal.
Yeah. I think that is so important. I think certainly in the early years, I think teachers as well, probably, but certainly in the early years, we ask all those questions on the joining form about, you know, what their favourite toy is, or their bedtime, you know, their nap routines, or that it would be something to add in there, wouldn't it? Are they chatty at home, or, you know, how do they communicate at home, maybe?
100%. That would be the dream. That would be amazing. Because if we can identify SM, you know, early on, that can make a real difference. So yeah, absolutely. And quite often educators might not even know that the child can talk more freely at home. Sometimes they think that they might just be, you know, a late talker, or maybe they're bilingual, maybe they assume that the child can't speak English. And that's, in the case of SM, not true.
Yeah. Wow, yes, that's a whole nother layer, isn't it? If you're talking about dual language learners, or wow, yes, right. So I think that very clearly illustrates there is a lot to this subject, isn't there? I mean, that is only merely a glimpse through the old keyhole there. So, right, if I'm a teacher now watching this, or an educator, an early years professional watching this now, thinking, this is the first I've heard of this, what is it? Where can I go to find out some more, just to get some information about this as a basic level, as a beginner level? Where can I go to get that information?
Okay, so luckily today the internet has got a lot of resources available, which is amazing. When I started, I was, I think, one of the first, like, you did the first kind of YouTube specific channels for selective mutism. There wasn't anything out there, so my YouTube channel would be a great starting point. And now there are other videos, like channels about selective mutism as well. The 𝗦𝗲𝗶𝗲, Selective Mutism Information Association, they have got a website, you know, with resources about selective mutism. They're the Selective Mutism charity, UK charity for selective mutism. they've got resources. Obviously, my website, confidentchildren.co.uk, has got lots of resources all about selective mutism, and specifically for teachers. So I've written some books, and the way, because I've been doing this for such a long time, I kind of, every time I come across the need, I write a book about it. And now I've got these 5 books. So the latest one, it was specifically for teachers. So I've got it here. So it's called Unless My Teacher, Why I Can't Speak at School. And I wrote this book because I thought writing a book to, like, it's from the perspective of the child, letting their teacher know the key points about, you know, how they're feeling, how SM affects them, and just, you know, how to get those messages across in a really kind of easy way. So I wrote this book, and it's kind of written in like a notebook, like the child writing, like as though they're writing a letter, and there are lots of sweet doodles throughout. So that's a nice little resource. I've also got a book called Understanding Selective Mutism, A Beginner's Guide. So my books are always quite, you know, to the point, like nice, easy reads. But there are also, of course, amazing comprehensive guides. For example, Maggie Johnson and Alison Winchins have written the Selective Mutism Resource Manual, which goes into a lot of detail as well. So nowadays there is so much out there if you want to learn about selective mutism, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Right. So let me put a challenge to you then, Lucy, because I think there is a temptation with some people in the early years to say, oh, well, they're shy, they'll grow out of it. When they get to school, they'll be fine. Just, you know, just leave them, you know, just they're quite happy. They're not causing any disruption. There's no kind of, they're not causing any problems. So we don't kind of, there is a temptation just to let it run, isn't it? So how important is it actually to identify selective mutism in the early years, or do we need to at all?
Oh, we definitely do need to, definitely.
Okay.
You know what, that is a common thing we hear quite often as therapists, you know, oh, just wait and see, give them time, just give them time to settle in. But on the contrary, what we find is that the longer a child is not talking, the stronger that identity of being the person who doesn't talk becomes, and the more entrenched the behavior becomes. So imagine a child who hasn't spoken for, say, 2 weeks versus a child who hasn't spoken for 2 years or even 1 year. Of course, the child who hasn't spoken for that extended period of time is going to find it so much harder to start talking. It's going to be a lot scarier for them. So if there is a child that you know that you're working with who is not talking, the earlier we can start the intervention, the better. If they're in an earlier setting, that is the dream time to start an intervention, because, you know, it's all play-based, and we can weave those interventions into the class environment. We can help to support the child to bring down their anxiety. And yeah, we definitely don't want to just wait and see, because what we'll find more often than not is that we'll get into year 1, the child's still not talking, year 2, the child's still not talking. And the older they get, the harder it is for them to overcome SM. It's still absolutely possible, but it does get more tricky the older they get.
Yeah. That does actually make sense, doesn't it? So I think it's one of the few speech and language and communication sort of disorders, if you like, that if left gets worse and worse. So right, okay, so in the early years, this is very important to have some strategies in place and some things that we can do to support children, even if we don't have children with SM at the moment, actually. So what are those strategies? What would you suggest to help children with SM?
Oh, again, so much to say. The first thing we want to do is remove pressure around talking. So we unintentionally often, you know, focus on the fact the child's not talking, and people sometimes make comments like, oh, are you going to talk today? Oh, come on, just say one word. And obviously it's all coming from a good place, because we want to encourage the child, but that's pressure, and the child feels that. Children are so intuitive, they know if we're trying to get them to talk. So the first step is to kind of create this environment where the child feels as though they don't have to talk. And I know it sounds a bit counterproductive, counterintuitive, but if they feel like they don't have to talk, then they'll start to relax. because what we know is that what triggers a fight or flight freeze response is the expectation to talk. So if they are with somebody, if they're in a situation where someone's expecting them to talk, that's when the heart rate will increase, their muscles will tense up, and they'll be kind of frozen. That's the expectation to talk is triggering that response. But if instead the adults around them are taking away that pressure, we give them the impression that, you know, there are so many ways that we can join in without having to talk. You know, we can do this, we can do that, and you know, and we avoid questions. That's really important. So when we first see the child, or when we're interacting with the child, we take part in a running commentary. So we might just chat away, almost like chit chat. So, oh, it's a lovely day today. And, you know, oh, look at this picture on the wall. Look at, you know, we're just chatting away. And we might play alongside the child and just describing what they're doing. You're making a really nice Lego tower there, or let me make a Lego tower. So we're just kind of, you know, describing, narrating. And what this is doing is the child will see that, oh, this person isn't trying to make me talk. And as a result, the throat muscles start to relax, and they start to relax, and they start to feel more comfortable, and the anxiety comes down. And that is the starting point. That is so important. So it's really important that everyone in the school is aware of the first kind of how we create that pressure-free environment. And there are these 6 do's and don'ts that I've come up with, like, for example, don't ask the child any questions at the start, etc. And on my website, confidentchildren.co.uk, there's a free download of like a summary sheet for schools with the 6 do's and don'ts, things that we should, you know, do to create this, or don't do. Like, don't put the child on the spot, don't ask them questions before they're ready. If they do talk, just act normally. Don't, you know, draw attention to the fact that they've spoken. So what I'd suggest is that if you are an early years staff member, or a staff member in a school, if you download that from the website, print it out, and just pass it around, you know, put it on display in the staff room ideally, just so people know or just email it around to staff, so everyone just understands not to put the child on the spot. So that's the first really important thing. And then there's so much, once that's been achieved, then we want to start the graded exposure. And just like with any phobia, the way we help a child to overcome a fear is we help them to face that fear in small, gradual steps. So step by step, we want to figure out what would be the first easiest step for this child to start making a step toward talking at school. So is it that we want a parent to come in and play a game with the child in a private room, and that might help the child to open up? Is it that, you know, they've got a friend or a sibling that they talk to in private, so maybe giving them some one-on-one time with that child, kind of away from others, in a kind of, you know, with a private area where the child doesn't feel like they'll be overheard. And then with time, we can bring new children into that situation. Is it that they've started reading with one adult, so therefore, or like, you know, doing phonics with one adult, so therefore we want to give them that one-on-one time with that adult, so because it's talking practice, or maybe making sounds, animal sounds with that one person. So depending on where the child is at, we're just figuring out how can we give them that practice time in a way that they can handle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And right, yes, and that just made me think of something else as well, Lucy, just talking about being with other children, because obviously certainly in early years settings they spend a lot of time with their peers and not necessarily with adults, a lot of time with other children. So how can we support those other children? How can we explain such a complex thing to young children? How can we support their peers?
Yes, so that is a really good point. It's so important that the peers understand. It does depend on the child, on the age of the children. So if they're very little, if they're in like a nursery, for example, they might be not really, they might not have picked up on the fact that the child is not talking. But what happens is when they start picking up on it, children make comments. They start making comments like, why don't you talk? Why doesn't they do it in front of the why doesn't she talk? When is she going to talk? So, or if the child does talk, then they'll go, oh, you're talking. And of course, this is all very innocent, and they're just being children. But those comments don't help. They actually make the child, you know, very uncomfortable and stop talking often. So what we want to do is brief those children. So you can do it in several ways. So I do have a book for this. So I've written this book called Why Doesn't Alice Talk at School?
Oh.
And this is specifically a storybook to read to friends and the class about selective mutism. So in this, basically, because again, all my books are kind of like resolving an issue that children with SM face. So for this one, it's basically the teacher talking to the class and explaining why Alice doesn't talk. And he starts off with explaining that everyone's scared of something. So, and then in the book it says, Maria said she was scared of spiders. Oliver said he was scared of heights. Lauren said she was scared of the dark. And then the teacher says, Alice is scared of talking at school, and this is how we can help her. And he explains in the book like the things to help Alice, like not asking her any questions that need a talking reply for now, just playing alongside her. You know, you can play catch with her. You don't have to try to make her talk. There are loads of ways to have fun with your friend. And if she does talk, put your acting hat on and just act like she always talked. Don't say wow or make a big deal out of it. And children, when we have these conversations with children who are kind of at the age where they are ready for those conversations, they get it. Again, children are so intuitive. When I have these conversations with children, they get, sometimes I don't even tell them initially. I kind of ask them in advance, like, do you think if she talks, we should say wow? And children say, no, we should just act normally because it might make her scared. So children do get it. So it's important to have those conversations with them, but without the child with selective mutism present, so that they can ask all the questions they need to ask without the child there.
And I've also, definitely.
I've also got video on YouTube called Video to Show the Class, which is another option to show the video to the class, or just for the teacher to have that, to watch the video and then have that conversation with the class, so that all the children have that kind of information. Actually,
that's a point, talking about classes, because I think in the early years it's a huge step in my mind to go from an early years setting which is all play based. It's got a very different structure, and then you move into school, and you're saying that selective mutism can be triggered by new situations, and gosh, you know, school is a very new situation, and it might be with new children. If you're moving to a different area, it might be all sorts of reasons that then triggers selective mutism again. So how is it that we can support that transition to make sure all the great work that we've done in the early years isn't then instantly lost on the first day that they start a new setting or a new school?
Yeah, that's such a good point. So now I'm doing, so at this time of year, so it's May as we're having the conversation, I've just done a Facebook Live the other day about transition, because now's the time before the child transitions for us to start thinking about this. So it's like we want to aid the child's transition as much as possible. So the key with anxiety is that the unknown triggers the anxiety. So if we're going into a new situation with new people, new place, new activities, it's really overwhelming for adults as well as children. So that to help a child with that transition, a child with selective mutism, we want to make those unknowns as known ahead of time, if possible. So anything that's new, we want to gradually introduce to the child ahead of time, if possible. So in an ideal world, before day one of their next year, so before September, they've already visited their new classroom. They've already had an explore. They've maybe got some pictures of their new classroom that they've looked at over the summer with mum or dad. Ideally, they've already, their new teacher and new teaching assistant are already familiar faces to them. They've already, in an ideal world, had some game sessions with these adults, maybe some sliding in or fading in sessions where the parent comes in, plays games with the child, and then the adult gradually joins in. So we want to start to help the child to become familiar with the new people, the new places ahead of time, so that over the summer, mum and dad can just be chatting with them about, gradually just, just sprinkling in, remember when you visited your new classroom, how exciting, and, when you played that game with that teacher or that teaching assistant, so that on day one, they already know who the teacher is, they already know the TA, they know the classroom, and it's not this big, overwhelming, loads of new things happening in one go. So that's really the key. Other small little things like ensuring that they've got a friend in their class. Some schools mix the classes up, so just, you know, ensuring if they do have a relationship or a particular like bond with a child, just having them in the same class and ideally sat next to each other in their new classroom, just so they've got that kind of support in place, that can really help.
Yeah. Oh, I think, and they're all very, very achievable strategies, those. That's nothing that's really out of the way, is it? You can certainly do that. So just thinking then, as you say, over the summer when there's a transition going on and obviously the schools are shut, I know a lot of earlier settings are still open during the summer, but it might be a bit quieter. If people wanted to find out more, because we have not even scratched the surface here today, what if people wanted to find out a bit more and maybe just get themselves a bit more knowledgeable before they start the new term in September? What can they do?
Yeah, so in terms of transition, I've got quite a few transition resources. So on the website, I've got confidentchildren.co.uk/freebies, and that through that link you'll find the do's and don'ts sheet that I mentioned earlier. You'll also find a transition top tips sheet. So that's got some you know, some tips all about transition. And of course, yeah, the YouTube channel has got some transition videos. And also I've mentioned some of my books. I've also got 2 others which I haven't yet mentioned. These are books that could be read to the child themselves. So the others were kind of aimed at other people. So one was for the teacher, the other one was for the peers and the friends. But I've got 2 if your child is ready. So usually, you know, you'll know if your child is not ready, for sure. So if your child you think is kind of some children with SM, they just don't want to talk about it at the beginning, and that's absolutely fine. We don't want to push them before they're ready. But if they are ready, then talking about it in a very kind of simplistic, child-friendly way can really help children. So I've got this book called My Name's Eliza and I Don't Talk at School, and My Name is Ben and I Don't Talk Sometimes. And these are books to read to the child themselves about SM, and they're very kind of simplistic. I don't actually mention the phrase selective mutism in the story at all. So I don't think that's necessary for children to know the term. It's just, I find it hard to talk sometimes, and this is when I feel uncomfortable, and you know, these are things that help me. So that can be another thing if your child is ready to actually have those conversations with them, because if we can get to a point where, you know, it's not a taboo topic, we kind of in a very like neutral way saying, I know you find it hard to talk sometimes, and that's okay. When you know, I'll be helping you, we're a team, we'll be doing some really small baby step practices. That can help them, and you know, for them to know, you know, we're going into school to help you to feel more comfortable, you know, playing a game in the classroom or wherever it might be. Just being quite open with them can really, really help, provided they're in a place ready for that.
Yeah. And as you say, as parents, and if you're like a key person, or if you're close to them in the early years setting, you will know when that time comes along, won't you? So well, and I will make sure, obviously, that all the links to your YouTube and your courses and your books are in the words that go along with the video, so you can click through and have a little look on the YouTube, or buy the book ready for September and get those read and know that all those resources are there to help you. Well, Lucy, as I say, we have merely touched on what is an incredibly interesting and complex sort of condition. I'm so pleased that you found time to come and talk to us today about selective mutism, and that is so, so useful. Thank you very much indeed for all those strategies and that help and advice. Thank you very much indeed, Lucy Nathanson.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all the educators who are watching this. Honestly, you don't know how much of a difference you can make to children with selective mutism. So thank you for watching and learning more.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, definitely. And I look forward to welcoming everybody to Early Years TV next week.